just south of Kansas City. Little do residents know, their peaceful enclave is about to become ground zero in a series of investigations that will span years, unearthing some of the most diabolical and sordid crimes area law enforcement has ever seen. On January 11th, a frantic young woman contacts the Overland Park Police Department. She's concerned about her sister-in-law, Lisa Stacy, who she hasn't heard from in days.
Lisa Stacy was a troubled young woman, 19, and she was involved with a man named Carl. She got pregnant. They got married, and they had this baby, Tiffany Lynn Stacy, but the marriage quickly fell apart within a few months.
The couple splits, and Carl moves to the Chicago area, where he re-enlists in the Navy. With no job and no place to go, Lisa and 4-month-old Tiffany soon find themselves living in a group home for women. But just a few days before her disappearance, Lisa's luck takes a turn when she's accepted into a coveted Kansas City outreach program.
The Kansas Outreach Program was a program that a businessman named John Osborne had started to help young women with young babies get a restart in life.
It's an opportunity that's too good to refuse. And on January 9th, Osborne picks Lisa and Tiffany up at her in-laws' house.
He had put them up at a hotel in Overland Park, Kansas, near his office.
But later that same night, Lisa makes a panicked phone call to her mother-in-law.
She's hysterical. She is crying and saying, "They're saying you're going to take my baby away from me. You're saying I'm a bad mother."
And the mother-in-law said, we're not trying to take your baby away. And Lisa said, "They've made me sign 4 blank sheets of paper."
And the mother-in-law says, "Don't do anything, don't sign anything. I'm not involved in this in any way." And then Lisa says, "They're coming now." And she hangs up. And that's the last time anybody hears from Lisa.
The following morning, her in-laws call the motel in search of Lisa and the baby. But they're stunned to learn that Lisa is gone, checked out. Her bill paid with a credit card from a local business.
They discover that it was not John Osborne that had rented the room, but a John Robinson. And they got an address for the business that he runs, Equi2.
Confused and worried, Lisa's brother-in-law checks out the firm.
A young man in his 20s, tall, is there and basically rudely pushes him out the door.
Then the mystery intensifies with yet another strange phone call.
Stacy's family receives a call from a priest, Father Martin, at a mission in downtown Kansas City. This Father Martin says that he's seen Lisa and Tiffany, that they're fine, but that they've taken off and left town with a guy named Bill. So the family, to verify this story, calls the mission, and they're told that there is no Father Martin at the mission. And at that point, the family is even more concerned, and they go to the police.
Unfortunately, investigators have little to go on, except for one thing. The case feels eerily familiar. 4 months earlier, another 19-year-old named Paula Godfrey was living in the Overland Park area when she too mysteriously disappeared.
She answered an advertisement for a secretary position, and it involved some travel, some training, and things like that.
Her parents never heard from her again. They did get a letter saying that she needed some time on her own away from her family, and, she was off finding herself. They didn't believe it was really from her. Paula's mother convinced her husband to go and report it to the police.
But Paula is of legal age, and with no evidence of a crime, there's little police can do.
It's not against the law to be a missing person, and the letters are saying, I'm fine, leave me alone.
Yet now, a young mother and her baby have also gone missing. And that has authorities growing increasingly concerned.
I had a couple of small kids, and I understood what it would be like to lose a small child. And I think that made it even more personal to me.
The search for Lisa and her baby goes by the book. Police start with the immediate family and work their way outward. They question Lisa's estranged husband, Carl, with whom she had a turbulent relationship.
He had a solid alibi with he was back in Chicago, and he wasn't even in the picture at the time.
Investigators also interviewed John Robinson, the man in charge of the outreach program Lisa hoped would be her salvation.
And he told me, she was referred to me with a young baby. I'd said I would put her up in my Kansas City outreach program. Lisa came to his office with a young man by the name of Bill, who she said was her new boyfriend, and that, they were going to go off together and they were going to start a new life. And she really thanked Robinson for all of his help and for being there to support her, but she really thought it was coming together and she was just going to go start a new life.
Bill. Investigators have heard the name before. The mysterious Father Martin had also spoken of a Bill, claiming that he and Lisa had run off together. Now police wonder what they have. A case of impetuous young love, or perhaps something more lethal.
It was just part of the confusion that was this case as to how does this all tie together.
According to reports, she'd recently joined a Kansas City outreach program for young mothers, but hit a roadblock when she met a new boyfriend. A man police know only as Bill.
Is this something you're sure about?
And from there, the trail goes cold.
There was no evidence of a crime. There was no crime scene. There was no body. There was, there was just no hard evidence to prove that anything had happened to them.
Then, suddenly, a new twist in the case.
These letters began to surface. Lisa's mother-in-law got one. The battered women's shelter got one. And in this letter, Lisa had told the mother-in-law, I've been down and out, things haven't been going good, but I've got an opportunity here to start a new life, and I'm going to do that. So, thank you for all that you've done, but I'm going to go off and start a new life, and I'm just fine.
There's no mention of Bill, but the rest of the letter seems sincere, except for one thing.
This letter was typed. Lisa didn't know how to type. And it just didn't sound like Lisa at all.
But with little else to go on, the case of Lisa and Tiffany Stacy slowly goes cold. Two years later, in June 1987, another Kansas City resident reaches out to Overland Park Police. He's searching for his stepsister, 27-year-old Catherine Clampett, a recent transplant to the area who he hasn't heard from in weeks.
She was going to move up here to try to improve her life.
She answers an ad in the newspaper for an executive secretary working for a busy CEO. And she goes to work for a man named John Dawson.
But not long after starting the new job, Catherine goes AWOL, or so it seems.
A short time later, her mother, back in Wichita Falls, Texas, gets a letter, a typewritten letter that's signed by her daughter, but it doesn't sound that much like her daughter, and she grows concerned.
Catherine's stepbrother calls her office and asks to speak to her boss, John Dawson. But is told that no such employee exists.
Her stepbrother went through her belongings. He found a receipt for the hotel where she had stayed, and it was signed by a John Robinson, not John Dawson.
In fact, it's the very same John Robinson who recruited Lisa Stacy into the Women's Outreach program 2 years earlier. A quick check reveals that Robinson is the owner of the company where Catherine works, a consulting firm called Equa 2.
So Catherine Clampett's stepbrother pays a visit to the Equa 2 offices only to find out that they're closed and that John Robinson is actually starting to serve a prison sentence.
As it turns out, Robinson had been arrested just weeks earlier on charges of fraud and theft.
That he was just a small-time con man. There was no indication that he had been involved in anything really much more than that.
Investigators waste no time questioning anyone who may have information on Catherine, but leads are few and far between.
When the detectives started talking to potential witnesses, you know, there was always, yeah, I saw her a couple of weeks ago, or, you know, I know that she didn't go to work for Robinson after all.
Witnesses' memories are spotty and contradictory, but there's an even bigger problem.
The connection wasn't made immediately between Paul Godfrey, Lisa Stacy, and Catherine Clampett. The cases were being distributed to different detectives. Now you can type in the names and a query can be popped up and searched in 15 seconds. Back then, everything was done by hand.
And police have little reason to cross-reference old files when there's no concrete evidence that a crime has been committed in the first place.
There were 3 disappearances connected to Robinson, but all 3 involved troubled women who were going off elsewhere, who had sent letters home and wanted to be left alone. The police were just treating these as typical missing persons reports where these women probably just did not want to be found.
More than 10 years pass, and one by one, the cases go cold. Then, in March of 2000, a Michigan woman named Carolyn Troughton grows concerned about the welfare of her 27-year-old daughter, Suzette.
Suzette Troughton had told her family that she was moving to Kansas because she was going to go to work for a wealthy businessman that did a lot of international traveling, and she was going to take care of this businessman's ailing father while they traveled.
But within just a month of her arrival, Suzette appears to have vanished without a trace. Taking matters into her own hands, Carolyn Troughton calls her daughter's employer demanding to know Suzette's whereabouts.
He tells her that Suzette has decided to take off with a man named Jim Turner, and they were going to be sailing around the world, and she was not going to be working for him after all.
Suzette Troughton was a mama's girl, was always in contact with her mom, either through email or on the telephone. Carolyn knew that her daughter would call her and let her fill her in on what was going on. She knew something terrible had happened.